So in contrast to the observational study is an experiment. And the main difference here, the thing that we really have to understand, is that an experiment has what an observational study doesn't, and that is it has control. The more control we have, the more pure our experiment is. So let's go ahead and start from the beginning here. When we run an experiment, just like when we run an observational study, the very first thing we start with is our sample. This is the group of all the people you're going to work with. Now, we'll go ahead and we'll talk about good sampling methods versus bad sampling methods later on. But for now, let's go ahead and mention the fact that in addition to control, the other thing you really want to have within an experiment is randomness. So we'd like to have these randomly selected people. That is, we don't want to have any bias. We don't want to select accidentally all women if we're trying to generalize to the entire population. We don't want to go ahead and select only wealthy people if we're trying to generalize to everyone in the United States. So we want them to be randomly selected and to represent the population. So that is, if you're trying to generalize to only women, it's totally okay to have a sample of only women. Once we've selected our sample, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and split them into groups. At minimum, we should have 2 groups if we're going ahead and running an experiment. The first group is going to be our treatment group. That is, if we're going to go ahead and test, does aspirin actually reduce your headache, the treatment group would be the group that gets the aspirin. The second group we have is what we call the control group. Now, the control group can be run a couple different ways, so let's go ahead and look at an example here. Let's say once again we wanted to test, does aspirin actually reduce your risk of having a headache? Well, if that's the case, then our treatment would be to give someone aspirin. If we're giving the treatment group aspirin, there are a couple different examples for what we can give the control group. 1, they can receive nothing at all. Now, in many cases, this isn't actually the best option. We have what's called the placebo effect. Now, if you haven't heard about the placebo effect before, I encourage you to check out the placebo-nocebo video. In essence, the placebo effect just says that when you take a medication, you have a preconceived idea that it's going to improve your situation. And just that idea alone is enough to cause you to feel the improvements, even if the medication has no effect at all. For that reason, the very act of taking a pill might be all that's causing the improvement or decline in your health. Because of that, giving up someone nothing is often substituted for giving someone what's called a placebo, or a sugar pill. That way you still have the idea that you're taking medication. By doing this, we would ensure that we're testing where an aspirin works, not whether taking a pill of any kind works. Now, in some cases, taking a placebo is also not a very good option. For instance, let's say we wanted to try out a new type of hormonal birth control. In this case, giving one group a placebo or a sugar pill probably wouldn't be the best option. So, the third thing we can do for our control group is give them an existing treatment. That is, we can test, is our type of hormonal birth control more effective than the existing treatment already on the market? So in this way, we have the treatment, the new thing we're testing out, versus the control group, which can have one of 3 functions. So to review really quickly here, if we're running an experiment, the key is to have control. We want to have control over the people who are selected. We want to be able to make sure they're random and they represent the population. We'd also like to be able to have control over if they take the treatment or if they're in what's called the control group. The control group itself can receive nothing, a placebo, or even an existing treatment. The next video we'll talk about how we split people up into these 2 groups and the best practices for running a successful and unbiased experiment.